Hi, my name is Jenny Carrington. I am the CEO of GTI Enterprises and the founder of Freedom to Fit nonprofit organization. And this is my presentation for a proposal of Communities of the Future, an integrated framework for environmental sustainability, holistic health opportunities, and experiential education from the lens of public health. Right now, there's a lot of hopelessness in the world, but I invite you to join me as we shift our perspective from all of the problems we're facing to all of the potential we have. What is problematic from a policy perspective is the sporadic communication among researchers, service providers, and government officials who make decisions about the allocation of limited resources to health, education, and human service systems that interact separately with the same children and families. Now let's play a game and replace the problem words with potential words, the three phrases you see listed at the bottom. When we re-say the quote, it sounds like this. The potential from a policy perspective is the cohesive and efficient communication among researchers, service providers, and government officials who make decisions about the allocation of abundant and fulfilling resources to health, education, and human service systems that interact interdependently with the same children and families. Now that you understand the game, let's try it again with one more quote. Here, we have a problem statement. Economists just assume that people show up dressed and ready to play in the free market, when in fact, there's a whole lot of work that goes on to make that happen. So let's try that again, except this time we'll replace the words and phrases with those that show potential. Economists just know that people are served with healthy and multi-generational programs in win-win trade-offs with accessible choices, and in fact, it feels effortless to make that happen. Research tells us that in order to move from problem lens to potential lens, we have to take everyone with us, and that means serving people from a lens of developmental justice, where everyone, regardless of socioeconomic status, race, or gender, is given the same experiences to thrive. This means taking an integrative approach and putting the things that we have in common as more important than the things we don't. It means having place-based experiences, family-centered services, using new media and new money to align around a common goal of health and well-being, and creating families and communities of color that use art and creativity to heal and unite. It's sort of like fitting pieces of a puzzle together. Now, these are just some of the pieces of the puzzle, but they're some of the most important. For example, every new community is going to need a steering committee with individuals dedicated to culling and curating the right partners and infrastructure. They will also need governance structures, the Roots Council, a permaculture design team, a regenerative agriculture plan that fits into the permaculture design, affiliation with local agencies that already exist and are serving people, guidance from our Indigenous brothers and sisters locally and abroad, strong university community partnerships, a water parliament, and of course, funding. What you're seeing on your screen now is one rendition of our Communities of the Future. Of course, each community is going to look a little bit different, or even vastly different, but what we want to be able to provide is a menu of the basic elements that would go into building and designing these communities. That includes the sustainable building materials like hempcrete instead of concrete, as well as the different technology companies and infrastructures that we need, such as the solar roof and urban feed models of aquaponics and vertical green growing, both in the Wikipod model and the CityPod model. Some other things that we would like to incorporate include our classrooms of the future. These could take place inside an agripod, so we could have green growing and experiential education right in our eco-campus that we're designing with these various eco-friendly, sustainable, and regenerative building elements. These classrooms of the future could also incorporate digital technology and virtual reality games to learn about what's going on in nature and in the eco-campus experience. To get specific, some of the components include our We Are Mother Earth Rights Land Covenant, our Freedom Charter School approval, our virtual reality user agreement, our Family Support Center, which integrates health and mental health services, our Eco Welcome Center, our AgriPods, CityPods, and Wikipods, which will illuminate the community in various aspects of the campus and of ecotourism throughout the forest, creating an eco-culture of both tourism, education, and housing. Our Stupa Dome, our White Eagle Sanctuary, our 360 stage, a sustainable theme park with playgrounds and rides. Perhaps most importantly, sustainable monorails that get us around the eco-campus as well as between communities. Now let's talk about the business model and what's going to drive this model forward for this Communities of the Future project. I'd like to read this quote. If love is to become a social and not a highly individualistic marginal phenomenon, if man is to love, then the economic machine must serve him rather than he serve it. He must be able to share experience, share work, rather than at best, share profits. And what we need is a single integrated knowledge base of shared theories. And so I began to think of a business model based on the idea of love. And what really that comes down to is understanding how the human organism actually creates self-love, and then translating that model of how the human organism works to create self-love into a business model, a professional model that also functions in a loving way, and then on a larger scale into institutions that also function together interdependently in a loving way. What you see in front of you is the model of self-love that demonstrates that we are a self as object, which means the things that happen to us, or a self as subject, which is the things that we do and we put out there, and then self-transcendence, which is both. We both are object and subject, and we are both self and other. And a whole encompassed self-love is mental, physical, emotional, self and other as one. This type of transcendence of self can also occur when different sectors and industries start to see each other as one. And so I actually found that Pat Gelsinger, the former CEO of Intel, had actually come up with the same paradigm of innovation as I had for self-love, except his paradigm was a triangulation of academics, venture, and industry. So using the model that we know about self-love, self as object and subject in order to self-transcend, we can actually translate that to the business sector, and we can include academics, venture capitalism, and our industries to both give and receive under one umbrella of a common goal, such as health and wellness. So who is it that's coming together for these common goals? Well, it's land stewards, consultants, inventors, academics, artists, hikers, farmers, activists, lawyers, woodsmen, healers, medicine people, travelers, engineers, educators, and Imagineers of all ages. Yes, the youth are so important. And together, we are coming together to create this global organism that's going to be like a helix, interdependent and functioning together under the sun, under solar power and other alternative energy for one common goal of healing our planet and ourselves. This is a non-exhaustive list of entities and companies that we would like to ideally work with. As you can see, it says proposed affiliates. Many of these companies are affiliates that we are in conversation with and collaborating with informally, brainstorming around a lot of these concepts, and are committed to working in a collaborative, integrative way. Also on this list are potential corporate sponsors. Nothing is set in stone. When we are in love, we like to share. So what is stopping all of our entities from coming together and sharing? Well, it would be the concept of ownership. So our business model based on love and a model of self-love and institutional love is based on removing ownership. But similar to the exercises we did at the beginning of the presentation with the quotes, when we remove the problem, we have to insert a solution. So I started looking at alternate models to ownership. And the first one was the stewardship model. Exactly what it sounds like a captain stewarding a ship. It's people who don't own the vessel but are leading and guiding it. The land trust model that aims to conserve natural landscapes, particularly its water sources, cultural resources, and landmarks through easements and use agreements. The Saguaro Juniper Corporation, which has conserved over 4,000 acres of land, mostly in Arizona, as a corporation of shareholders that came together to not share in profits, but to share in the conservation efforts of preserving this land, and that ranch land particularly. And finally, the tree that owns itself, which is a white oak in Athens, Georgia, that is said to own itself after its owner deeded the tree to itself. Which brings us to the meat of the innovation, which is that we can actually create shares based on a metric of land stewardship or water stewardship, wherein the shareholders are actually giving over their rights to the actual environment. And instead of shareholders, they become steward holders. And instead of investing for profit, they're investing for conservation. But that doesn't mean that there won't be any profit, because when the Wisdom Council makes decisions in the best interest of the shareholders, which is the actual environment, we will start to see clean air, water, and land produce abundance that can give back to the people in the form of patronage dividends, which I will discuss in just a moment. So the Wisdom Council would replace what is traditionally called the Board of Directors. And the Wisdom Council would be consisting of indigenous elders, youth, and leaders in land stewardship and human development initiatives. The executive branch of the corporation, or the management branch, would be called our core activators, conducting on-site resilient energy. Finally, both the core activators, the executive branch, and the Wisdom Council, the decision-making branch, would be able to turn to the International Leadership Advisory Board, which would be basically the sciences and the academic board for guidance on how to actually implement certain progressive concepts and technologies. Once our Together Under the Sun affiliates have started making formal contracts, we could also discuss doing business as multiple different entities depending on what type of transactions are being promoted. Last but not least, the beautiful thing about this corporation is that this would be a cooperative corporation structure. So even though it would be set up as a corporation, we would follow a lot of the protocols of a traditional cooperative, including the one member, one vote structure. By designing it this way, we can provide both a traditional venture capitalist investment model and a cooperative structure. As our contracts increasingly allowed for, we would also be able to provide steward holders their dividends in the form of any alternative currency that our corporation had partnered with or created a metric for exchange rates. And that could be things like Ethereum, Bitcoin, but more importantly, cryptocurrencies that are actually asset-backed, like the Earth Dollar, the Lanus, or the Ohm. So why a C corporation? Well, I did give some reasons, but a C corporation allows for unlimited growth potential. We can actually have an unlimited number of shares. We can easily have shareholders that cross international borders, or steward holders in our case. We can also do a really low buy-in. That means we can set our buy-in at something like $3 instead of the traditional $10,000 or $20,000 mark that you see larger cooperatives asking for buy-ins at. It also means that when the time is right, we can actually go public and go to the stock market. We can release as many ICOs as we need to, which is an initial coin offering. So we can create utility tokens for different communities and metrics for those exchange rates. And finally, we can transition to a B Corp when the time is right. So, who will this corporation serve? Well, our global organization, which is made up right now of informal collaborative relationships, has access to thousands of acres of land collectively and are already working together via phone, email, and other types of collaborative efforts. As we were able to get land stewards on board with the game plan, we would potentially be able to start stewarding land all the way up from the top of the Appalachian Trail in Canada down through Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Costa Rica, Ohio, Colorado, Nevada, California, Iceland, Norway, and Egypt. Together, this means millions of people outside our major metropolitan areas, as well as a target focus on veterans, low-income families, and hikers. A lot of these properties are located along hiking and biking trails.
So the roles of the C Corp are very diverse, but these are a few examples. It could be a back-end warehouse for cross-university collaborative curricula, and it could be a holding company for the real estate cooperative, both for the rural and urban areas. That would basically function as a land trust. It could be a holding company for other parts of the collaborative corporation, which would be our interactive hub for building design and things like that. It could also act as an online storefront for vendors and providers of conscious events that have been vetted and are selling products that are good for the earth. Um, it could also be accreditation agency to basically earthmark products and services, basically giving them our badge of approval. It could be a storefront for the Freedom School charter system, for the asset-based cryptocurrencies, as well as a media agency. Although we'll go into more detail on the business plan, our 5-year funding streams are going to be primarily corporate sponsorships, grants, regenerative fee schedules, which are circular economy, an international IPO, and local coin offerings, and people wanting to invest in cryptocurrencies, especially ones that are asset-backed. Moving into years 10 through 30, we're looking more at our sustainable production, agroforestry, cacao, essential oils, the wood shop, which would be furniture, instruments, signs, things like that. Workshops, live workshops, events, curricula, our hiker hostel, ecotourism, a theme park, festivals, green growing, fish farming, our cafe, art gallery, specialty products. There could be a recording studio. This list is non-exhaustive. So how would all of these profits get redistributed back to steward holders? Well, the model would essentially be distributing materials that were needed to enhance quality of life. So fresh local fruits, veggies, and grains in surplus, high-quality sustainable products, including home building and furnishing materials, eco timeshares, access to open-source databases for commercial use, subscriptions to online and on-site services through our corporation, and of course, payouts in the form of equivalent asset-backed cryptocurrencies or the local dollar as it is affiliated. So how on earth are we going to get everybody on board with We Are Mother Earth when a lot of people see themselves as competitors? The answer is to ask traditionally competing brands to demonstrate and to model what collaboration looks like for our youth, for our next 7 generations, by banding together to invest in solar power, together under the sun. This will take place in the form of a cross-country road trip from Urban Light in Los Angeles to the United Nations in New York. A high-visibility IPO road trip is a common technique for corporations going public with their mission. So once again, we could start at Urban Light in LACMA and finish on the lawn of the United Nations on International Peace Day, ideally. We would recruit traditionally competing corporate sponsors to join us together under the sun, i.e. investing in solar power for the next 7 generations. We would stop at approximately 30 schools on the road trip to demonstrate to children the power of solar energy with our partner Leader of Light. And our school assemblies can also include meditation, a screening of the film Gathering Our Hearts at Standing Rock, as well as that instructional component of building a solar light out of an old 2-liter Pepsi bottle. Finally, we could have the kids make art about water justice and even potentially have a band finish out the day. What exactly are we raising money for? Well, this is where the branding comes in. We Are Mother Earth. Our real estate cooperative is going to be the headliner of our brand. It is going to basically protect any of the land that we acquire together as a collaborative under an Earth Rights Covenant and an experiential education charter. This combined land is going to be the asset-backed trust that supports our cryptocurrencies, and it will mark the digitally expansive territories under which we have decentralized local governance with roots councils that are based on values of egalitarianism and sociocracy. The hallmark of the economic system will be our community foundations. We'll start with one and then we'll expand regionally, which will be responsible for the reinvestment of abundant resources to like-minded nonprofit organizations, as well as its brother company, Our Commons, which will act as a broker using convertible investment notes for abundant dividends to be reinvested into for-profit ventures that can then be paid out to steward holders later on. And therefore, people can buy in and cash out and receive their annual dividends in various forms of asset-backed cryptocurrencies, as well as traditional fiat currencies. Now, obviously, we don't go from 0 to 60. We have an expansion plan that takes us from pilot to practice. As you can see, our teams start broad and then they get narrower as over time. And we are able to basically create work groups as we become more organized. And when our corporation is officially established, we will also be able to have official divisions. Those divisions will then interact with the Wisdom Council, and the councils will also interact with the local decentralized Roots Councils at each site. So to review, the brand is We Are Mother Earth, which is the landholder of all the real estate and acreage, both rural and urban, that our collective is basically putting in the pot. We have Roots stewards, who are the people that are responsible for maintaining each property in each community. We have the community residents, which might be veterans, which might be students, which might be low-income families, etc. And we have the on-site Roots management, which are directed by the Roots councils. So in the startup phase, the cooperative corporation, will be run by a mix of the core activators and the Wisdom Council. So it's the core council, it's the startup council that's eventually going to break into what will become the executive branch and the council branch. So as you can see, there will be a CEO, a CSO, a CFO, a CMO, a legal advisor, an Indigenous We Are Mother Earth representative, an investment representative, a land operations representative, a conservation representative, a worker cooperative operations representative, which is basically the labor management, sustenance operations, which is food and shelter, event operations, social development operations, and an ecotourism rep. None of these titles are set in stone, but this is a robust foundational framework from which to start. So as the executive branch splits off and the Wisdom Council expands to its full form, we're going to start to see greater representation. So not just people from the umbrella organization, but also some Roots management representation, some community member representation, and some stewardship representation from our brother and sister companies that are doing things like regenerative agriculture, sustainable fashion, and introducing new technology like aquaponics. So our focus right now is to identify folks who would be stand-up candidates for the Startup Council, which will then work together to establish a final working model of the community land trust structure, as well as the expansion plan. With proper legal advisory, the Startup Council would then be able to establish bylaws, would finalize the We Are Mother Earth Rights Covenant, and finalize the startup business plan. The bylaws will then be in place to secure prospective properties and Roots property councils, and then once that's done, the Startup Council will basically disband. So what kind of capital will this take? Phase 1, we need $50,000 seed money to finalize our research and development and gather the Startup Council and be able to give them a stipend. Our 6-month goal would be that we've identified the preliminary partners and we have legal teams in place who have helped us to finalize our cooperative corporate share structure. We would also like to have formal partnerships in place with the leading cryptocurrencies as well as solid metrics for exchange rates. This would enable us to open up an angel investor round where we could secure approximately $1.5 million to save any property that is currently under foreclosure, to begin construction of the Demopod, Wikipod, and Agripod, as well as to bring in experts to finalize the governance structure, voting structure, and patronage dividend structure. Part of this initial funding would also be used to gain corporate sponsorships for our 2018 Together Under the Sun road trip and public offering with various initial coin offerings from different localities that are doing their own coin offerings. The money raised from this would continue to go to tracking and adjusting the construction of the Demopod, Wikipod, etc. with Urban Feed and Solar Roof. It would also begin to start building up a savings in the community foundation and to market and bring in like-minded for-profit and nonprofit partners. The final phase of funding just for 2018 would be the release of our Freedom Charter School Experiential Education Charter. And that would basically be getting communities who plan to have an eco-campus component, which all should to some scale, coming on board and agreeing what components of their educational curriculum are going to essentially be universal within the We Are Mother Earth cooperative. So thank you so much for watching this presentation. There is a lot more to come. This is just the beginning. My name again is Jenny Carrington. I am the CEO of GTI Enterprises. You can learn more at www.livegti.com. Have a beautiful day.